And now the conclusion of working the system. They were both dead. Negron discovered the two lifeless bodies lying face down in the water. Turning over the first corpse, he could find no visible marks anywhere on the body, save for a trickle of blood that streamed from the corner of its mouth. A quick visual examination of the second body led to the same conclusion. Strangely, neither of their guns had been taken. He ran back to the skiff and contacted Pelreski. "Michaud's here," he began without preamble, breathing hard and silently cursing himself for not kicking cigarettes years ago. "Looks like he brought more friends. I'm going up to Glazier's flat." "Slow down, Negron." "No, damn it, he's here. Those two uniforms you assigned to watch the place are dead, necks broken. I found them lying behind the building. The rear entrance has been forced and the alarm deactivated. They're inside." "All right, I'll have backup over there. Don't go in without backup. You got that?" "Understood." After finishing with Pelreski, Negron tried calling Glazier, but no one answered. He jumped out of the vehicle and returned to the rear of the building. Stepping over the bodies, he pulled his gun and slipped through the door. Inside, Negron moved cautiously along the dimly lit hallway toward the elevators. Reaching them without incident, he pressed the button to take one up to the 8th floor. The button, a square gray touchpad with a red arrow, did not respond. He pressed it again, harder this time, but again it did not acknowledge. Finally, from the tiny round speaker below the button, a pre-recorded message announced that the elevators were out of order and maintenance had been alerted. Negron slammed a fist into the speaker before heading for the stairs at the opposite end of the hall. It was going to be a long climb. Negron slowed his pace as he approached Glazier's floor. Pausing again to catch his breath, he leaned over the railing and gazed down at the stairs below. Satisfied that no one was following, he turned to make his way up the last remaining flight of steps when something pierced his upper chest and sent him staggering back into the wall. He grabbed the palm-sized knife handle and yanked the blade from his flesh with a grunt. Negron's assailant leapt from the railing above and crashed into him, sending the detective tumbling down the stairs. His gun flew from his grasp as he struck the concrete floor. An expanding circle of blood soaked his shirt around the knife wound. The attacker sauntered down the stairs, giving Negron the opportunity to get a good look at the Sentinel-class android from Sing's holographic dog and pony show. The android Glazier would have recognized as Commander Elyon Zamora. "You look a little down, cop. Let me help you up." Zamora reached down with one arm, grabbed Negron by the front of his shirt, and yanked him to his feet. Before Negron could muster enough strength to defend himself, Zamora pitched him into the far wall, knocking the wind out of him. Negron staggered down the steps, leaning against the metal rail for support. As he went for the door that led out to the 7th floor hallway, Negron spotted his firearm on the other side of the landing. The android couldn't possibly see the weapon from where it was standing. Negron threw himself to the right and was just about on top of his gun when Zamora launched himself from the top step. While the android was in midair, Negron lunged for the weapon, twisted, and fired 2 rounds into its chest. Zamora landed in a crumpled heap at the bottom of the stairs. Negron scrambled across the landing. He took aim at his attacker, but Zamora remained still. The detective began his unsteady ascent up the stairs. That was my last Zamora. Pushing himself away from the railing, Michaud calculated his chances of killing his targets before the wounded detective reached him. He hurried down the hall until he came to Glazier's apartment and pulled his comphone from his coat pocket. After tapping a series of buttons on its screen, Michaud pressed the device against the lock beside the door. He waited nearly 30 seconds as the application ran through thousands of combinations. Finally, the lock clicked, and the phone's screen changed from solid red to flashing green. Upon slipping into the apartment, he was engulfed in almost total darkness. Dim streetlights, filtered through living room blinds, provided the only illumination. He closed the door gently and waited for his eyes to adjust before maneuvering through the flat. As he passed the kitchen, Michaud noticed a feeble orange glow gamboling beneath a half-open door at the end of a short hallway. Treading softly, he approached and pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. Atop a dresser to the right, the tiny flames of 3 candles reacted to the draft from an open window. Michaud stepped into the room and froze at the sight of Eklund lying peacefully on a bed atop wrinkled sheets. Light and shadow danced over her bare legs. He stood motionless for a full minute, observing her breathing beneath the dark red nightshirt. Only when he was convinced that she was truly asleep did he approach. Making his way to the foot of the bed, Michaud reached out with his free hand to touch her skin. Almost perfect. He ran a finger slowly from her toes up to her thigh. That was as far as he got. In a blur of motion, Eklund's leg shot forward, planting her shin firmly into his midsection. Michaud doubled over, but recovered quickly. He threw himself forward, grasping for Eklund's hair, but she rolled away and dove off the opposite side of the bed. Michaud smiled as he drew himself to his full height. He pulled his comm phone from his pocket. "It'll be such a pity to waste you, my dear. If only you understood your potential. But I suppose it's too late now." Behind him, the bedroom door slammed closed. Michaud glanced over his shoulder and straight down the barrel of a military-grade blaster. Glazier took aim at his head. "Been a long time, Ollie." "Cam, my old friend, there's no need for the heavy artillery." Michaud raised both hands. "I'm unarmed. Besides, we used to be friends." "Until you sent your new androids to kill us. Why?" Without lowering his arms, Michaud turned to face him. "Because you killed my old androids, remember? That was 2 years ago." "Told you I'd never forget." "I didn't have a choice, Ollie." "You always have a choice. Just like Jorgen could have chosen to provide a shuttle so I could take my androids somewhere safe and give them a chance to survive." "It isn't that simple. I couldn't disobey orders." "Right. Because all you cared about was avoiding a dishonorable discharge. Tell me, Cam, would you have stood up to Jorgen if he'd ordered you to murder innocent humans?" Michaud turned his attention to Eklund. "And would it have been as enjoyable for you to kill them?" "But they weren't human, Ollie," she reminded him. Michaud smiled. "And therein lies the irony." He pressed a button on his phone. Eklund gasped, her eyes wide as she collapsed to the floor. "Mira!" His gun trained on Michaud, Glazier hurried over and crouched down beside her. She knelt on the floor, hunched over. "Mira, talk to me." When she did not respond, Glazier looked up at Michaud. "Drop that phone." Michaud tossed it atop the bed. "What the hell did you do to her?" "Programming conflict. It'll resolve itself momentarily." "What?" Glazier's head snapped back as Eklund's heel connected with his chin. He dropped on his side and tried to push himself up, but Eklund was on top of him instantly, pinning him to the floor. Her first punch knocked the back of his head against the floor. As she cocked her arm for a second blow, Glazier grabbed her waist and twisted himself to the right. Eklund toppled away, striking her head against the metal bed frame. If she felt any pain, it wasn't obvious. Glazier barely had enough time to get his legs under him before she charged again. This time he was prepared. As she closed in, Glazier sidestepped and slipped an arm under hers. Using her momentum, he tossed her against the wall. Her shoulder dented the plastboard with an audible crack. But even that didn't stop her. She pushed off and started toward him once more. Glazier leveled his blaster. "Mira, stop!" Eklund froze, her expression impenetrable. "What the hell are you doing?" Protecting me," Michaud replied. With a grin, he held up his phone and waved it playfully. "You still don't get it, do you? Better figure it out fast, Cam. You're not going to survive the next 5 minutes unless you use that blaster." He tapped on the screen and Eklund moved in, renewed bloodlust in her eyes. Glazier blocked her swing with his gun hand, but cried out as she slammed her heel into his knee. It buckled instantly, throwing Glazier off balance and sending him crashing onto the bed. The blaster fired. Glazier drew in a sharp breath, his injuries forgotten, at the sight of the smoldering hole in Eklund's chest. She staggered forward and fell on top of him, her face above his. The stench of burned flesh turned his stomach. "I'm so sorry, Mira." She touched him tenderly on the side of his face. As their gazes met, she caressed his cheek before sliding her hand down and wrapping her fingers around his throat. "Mira, no!" Eklund spoke through gritted teeth. "Stop me, please." Tears streaked her face from eyes that betrayed stark, hopeless fear. I can't. He grabbed her wrist and tried to tear her hand away, to no avail. As his airway constricted, Glazier desperately pried at her fingers and pummeled her arm, but her grip only tightened until the blaster fired again. It was then that Glazier noticed, the muzzle pressed against her throat. He never felt her take it from his hand. Glazier sucked in air as Eklund slumped forward, dead weight pressing against him. The blaster dropped to the floor with a dull thud. He wrapped his arms around her as they slid from the bed together. Gently, he lowered her to the floor and slipped a bloody hand from beneath her head. Glazier picked up the blaster and leveled it at Michaud, but the bastard was gone. Only his phone remained. It lay atop the wrinkled sheets, numbers flashing across the screen. Negron appeared in the doorway, gun in hand. He limped into the room, one side of his shirt drenched in blood. Michaud? Glazier peered down at Eklund and shook his head. Gone. Well, he didn't get past me. He must have jumped out the window. Yo, fuck him. I need to get her out of here. Glazier leaned forward to lift Eklund. When a flash of light appeared above the bed, it formed into a holographic image of Michaud. Congratulations, Cam. You have now officially killed my last android. The engineer flashed a wry smile. How does it feel? I imagine much the same way I felt on the Kindred. Well, sorry I couldn't stick around, but I need to get back to work. Time to make some new friends, so to speak. The hologram looked from Glazier to Negron. Gentlemen, I believe we met like this once before. In which case, I shall leave you now as I did then. Good luck. With that, the hologram vanished. Shit! Negron aimed a thumb at the bedroom door. The phone's a bomb. We gotta move. Glazier's heart slammed in his chest as he took one last look at Eklund. I'm sorry, Mira. Negron turned and limped out of the room. Glazier shot to his feet as the phone emitted an ear-piercing screech. He slammed the door closed behind him and bolted after Negron. They barely made it 3 steps before the blast rocked the apartment. Ripped from its hinges, the bedroom door chased after them, flipping end over end down the hall. Glazier threw himself to the left, tackling Negron onto the kitchen floor. Cabinet doors burst open, ejecting cookware and non-perishables. Windows shattered everywhere. Just as abruptly, it was all over. Sirens wailed as police skiffs floated outside. Glazier lay on the floor, staring at the blue and red lights flashing across the ceiling. A few feet away, Negron rolled onto his back and groaned. If I ever find that little prick, I'm going to kill him. Not if I find him first. And believe me, I will. Under the cover of darkness on a typical Yakina Bay night, the city throbbed with the feverish energy of its inhabitants' nocturnal activities. This breath of life, seedy as some of it was, did not restrict itself solely to the strip clubs and markets on the street below, but also existed in the skies, as skiffs, both police and private, soared to their respective destinations. Surrounding them in their flight through the city, computer-animated billboards played out on the sides of skyscrapers hundreds of stories above the streets, advertising every product or service available to slake one's every desire. Far above it all, a dim light shone from the grimy window of a small office at Satellite Security. Its inhabitant, desensitized to the tawdriness, instead stared longingly at a starless sky. He was working overtime tonight, just as he'd done every night for the past week and a half, in a feeble attempt to forget. Despite his best efforts, he could not prevent his thoughts from drifting to images of what was, and what could have been. He felt nothing and cared about even less. Fleetingly, he'd considered returning to system duty, but finally rejected the idea outright. He didn't want to relive those days. He rose from his seat and checked his watch. It was 10 o'clock. An entire hour had passed while he sat in private reverie. He hadn't realized until now how tired and hungry he'd become. He snatched his coat from the rack near the window and started to put it on when the phone on his desk signaled an incoming call. Who the hell is this? He moved back to his desk and let his hand drop lazily onto the answer button, and immediately wished he hadn't. Working a bit late, or did you fall asleep at your desk 5 hours ago? Glazier groaned inwardly at the sight of the smirking face on the screen. He had a fleeting urge to put his fist through it. Why do you always interrupt me when I'm on my way out? Impeccable timing. Negron took a final drag from his cigarette. We got a witness that said he saw Michaud jump out of your apartment window onto a skiff that was hovering outside just before the explosion. Okay, well, thanks for the update. Nice working with you. Have a good night. And not so fast, brother. Palreski wants to talk to you in his office. I think he's got a job offer for you. I already have a job. I'm talking about a real opportunity here, not that rent-a-cop bullshit. Negron lowered his voice before continuing. Sorry, I know you're going through a rough time right now. I could use a vacation myself. Look, we're short-handed, and Palreski was damned impressed with your work on this android case. You have military experience, and you know your way around weapons. If you want to be part of our team, there's a place for you here. It's up to you. Sleep on it tonight. I'll see you in the morning. Glazier was about to comment on the likelihood of that, but Negron had already terminated the call. He closed his eyes, rubbed the bridge of his nose, before finding the strength to get up and go home. The elevator doors opened to admit a rather irritable Cameron Glazier. He was coming off a sleepless night. Yet for some damn reason, he found himself moving through the halls of System PD headquarters toward what might be the start of a new life, a meaningful change, and a purpose. As a supervisor in a security system company, he was wasting his life and he knew it. It was the same routine every day. Here, though, he could make a difference. Besides, Michaud was still out there. A few meters ahead, he spotted Negron packing up his desk. You recruit people, then you hit the road? That's never a good sign. I'm not quitting. I'm moving to a cubicle next to Palreski's office. Negron pointed to an empty desk across the room. Honestly, I wasn't sure if you'd show up. I told the captain you would, which means if you didn't, I'd have dragged your sorry ass in here myself. Is he around? Negron cocked his head toward Palreski's office. He said you could go in any time. I'd take this if I were you, Glazier. Desk life ain't for you. Right, I'm a man of action. See, now you're talking. So glad you're looking out for me. I'll see you later. Negron shook his head and returned to his task. He paused as he picked up the notepad on which he'd scrawled what information he could remember about the Sentinel and Siren class androids. Negron had wanted to give these notes to Glazier a few days ago once the dust had settled. Hey! Negron held up the notepad, then hesitated, pulling it back toward him. Good luck, brother. Glazier knocked on the door and stepped through. Immediately, Negron moved to the shredder a few feet away from his desk. With a sigh, he tore off the page and fed it into the slot. Every android we produced was programmed to preserve human life, even at the cost of its own. Seng's words came back to him as the page was pulled into the machine's grinding teeth, and the words Geary Corporation, Eklund, Amira, Siren Class, serial number 6AR155A-09 were chewed into indecipherable slivers.